Hey, welcome to this week's Sermon Extra. My name is Cady. I'm the pastor of Whitefields Community Church. I'm joined here today by Michael Payne, the worship pastor here at Whitefields Church. And this is our weekly video in which we go a little bit deeper on the topic that we studied on Sunday. And we maybe give a little more insight, talk about some things that didn't make it into the sermon that are really valuable things. But of course, you only have so much time to discuss them on Sunday. So we have this great opportunity to kind of back and forth discuss some of those things. Hey, if you're just tuning into this, would you do us a favor? Like this video and share it. So give it a thumbs up or a heart or whatever app you're watching on. Go ahead and like this video, share it with friends. And we'd love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts. And one thing you could do that would really help us is if you would give us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would really help us. That boosts us in the algorithm. It helps us if you subscribe on YouTube and click that notification bell. That way you'll be notified anytime we go live, anytime we post a video, and you can keep in touch with us and keep abreast of all the happenings at our church and the things that God's doing and all the good gospel-centered content that we're putting out to bless you, and not just you, but other people too who are going to receive these messages through you sharing them on social media, sharing them through email with friends, etc., which we absolutely encourage you to do. Well, this week, our message was called "The Last Shall Be First." And it was from Genesis 49, but you started us off really interestingly in Luke chapter 2, looking at Simeon, it says that he was waiting for the consolation of Israel. And you helped us to see that the consolation of Israel was a promise that came through what I found fascinating, the very first prophecy through a person in the Bible, which was in Genesis 49, when Jacob blesses and prophesies over his sons. And there was this prophecy about Judah. Now, there was one thing you said about Judah that was interesting, because you said that Judah was the last born child of Leah. And that's kind of true, but kind of not. So maybe we could discuss that.
Yeah. Well, as you probably well know, whenever you're diving into these topics and you're studying to deliver a 35-minute sermon, you're probably wading through hours and hours and hours of content. And I read there, and it says there at the end that she bore no more; she ceased bearing, and.
That's in Genesis
29, the last verse, that Judah was the last, and it's a great story. Yeah, the praise, Judah means praise. He's the last, of her sons. But as you go on through chapter 30, that narrative kind of seems to be strengthened with the fact that, she then gives her maidservant to Jacob, because she no longer could bear children, or she was barren at that time. But then as you continue through chapter 30, you come to this incident where Reuben brings in these mandrakes that he finds.
What's a mandrake?
I have no idea what a mandrake
is. Actually, I do know what a mandrake is, because I recently saw a mandrake forest. So it's a type of plant that grows in a swamp.
Yeah. Well, so these swampy plants. Reuben brought it, and like Rachel's like, give me some of those, let Reuben give me some of those mandrakes. You've taken my husband, now you're going to take these mandrakes from me.
Because mandrakes were thought to produce fertility.
That's
and
right.
Apparently they worked.
Apparently they worked. And so then it says that God listened to Leah, and she bore another son. And then she ends up, which was Zebulun, and then bears another son, Issachar. And then further on, of course, she gives birth to Dinah, which is ended up being the sister in the family. So I just owned up to the mistake there. Just, hey, all this content didn't exactly continue reading on when you're looking at this thing. So for all of those who were stumbled on Sunday, she does have 2 more kids and then a sister.
I have to buy a new TV now, because we were watching online from home. And I was so upset. Actually, my wife was so upset she broke the TV. It's not true.
Heresy.
It's not true, but it's a good story. Yeah. Okay, so we cleared that up. And, there's a really interesting story about, you had mentioned the violence of some of the sons and how it says there that they were not chosen because they were violent, which comes out in the story of Dinah, which is interesting. But what's also interesting is that in chapter 38 of Genesis, there's this very terrible story about Judah and about really kind of how much of a heathen Judah ends up being. And I mean, he does go through a kind of a progression towards the end of the story in Genesis where he kind of redeems himself, but not really fully, because he's the other guys are like, hey, let's kill Joseph. And Judah's like, or we could make money off of Joseph and let somebody else kill him, right? Like, and then he kind of helps out his little brother Benjamin. But it's interesting that you really consider that Judah was not an exemplary person. And the fact that God chose him gives a lot of hope to people like me and you, right? That God chooses sinners. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of the things that got me thinking, especially as I said in the message from the end of chapter 49, where Jacob asked to be, buried with Leah. And Leah, of course, is not the one that was loved, as even if you read the whole mandrake incident with like she was not the one that's like, that was loved in the family. Jacob didn't work 7 years for her, or another 7 years at all. So that had got me thinking this whole idea of last shall be first, and how God chose Judah, and how probably Judah was wondering when this whole blessing was pronounced on him, like, how on earth am I this one? And so what got me thinking was that. And then there was another thing that didn't make it in the sermon that I really thought about was there is this Proverbs 25 verse 7 where I'll probably read it to you so that I don't mess it up, but it says, do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great, but it is better to be told, come up here, that to be put lower in the presence of the noble. And that just got me thinking about the fact that we as Christians, we have been called forward by the King. We're not those that sit at the end of the table or the lowly ones or anymore. And that got me thinking about the wedding feast there mentioned in Matthew chapter 22, where the King's like, go get everybody, the good, the bad, and invite them into this feast. And just that whole idea of the last becoming first, that we've been called, to the wedding feast of the supper. Wedding feast of the Lamb, which of course mentioned in Revelation as well. And that got me thinking of Hebrews chapter 4, where we can come boldly into the throne room of grace. And then in Hebrews chapter 11, where just, the whole idea that there's no longer the curtain that separates us from the Holy of Holies. We can come in with confidence into the presence of God. The King has called us forward. And it's just this whole idea, and I think you and I discussed it, this is just kind of a theme of the Bible, the second, the lowly, the sinners, all those things. We're the ones that have been called forward, and, we can only be grateful for that. So
yeah, for sure. Well, that's really good stuff. Hey, if you missed this past Sunday's sermon, you can find it on our YouTube channel. You can find it on our podcast. You can find it on our website, whitefieldschurch.com. We're basically everywhere online. And so go and find us, like us, subscribe, comment, review. Those would all help boost this gospel-centered content that we hope to get out to the world. So we hope that everything we do here at Whitefields Church helps you grow in your relationship with God and your knowledge of His Word. And we will see you next week. God bless you.
God bless.